All right, good afternoon, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed that video. It's welcome once again on my behalf to all of you who've come from all over the world and, of course, from India, and to this Investor Day. As Lalit said, we've been trying to put this together for a while, and we're delighted that we're able to do so at a relatively good time, except for the rain, which we were able to sort of overcome today, I guess, a little bit. And but the good time is because it's a good opportunity for all of you to have seen Oragadam, which is where most of our motorcycles are made now, and for you to understand about the production side and the supply chain side of things, which in my let's say view to you is now really running as a well-oiled machine. And hopefully you were able to see that at Oragadam, that we understand manufacturing properly, we understand sourcing, we understand quality, and we're on the right path on all of these areas. And the entire nuance of what we're building, how we're building it, how we're going about the make versus buy decisions, the investments in particular areas, the outsourcing of others. So there's a lot of work which has gone in, and now I believe it's well sorted and settled as far as our manufacturing is concerned. And of course, there's still tons to do, and Govind would have told you about what all plans we have moving forward. But what that gives us, of course, is it gives us the opportunity, and it has for some time now, to focus on the front end and to focus on the market front. And of course, that's where the biggest frontier is, and the battles are to create the mind space for Royal Enfield. And while we at Royal Enfield, of course, think day and night and eat and sleep our motorcycles, it's obvious that in a consumer's mind these days, with thousands of brands which are floating in and out, they don't think of us as much as we think of us. And therefore, to make an impact, we have to do something which is very different. And different doesn't mean just shouting out loud, or in our case, it doesn't mean different for the sake of being different, but it means different with a depth and a purpose. And perhaps that's what the rest of the day today is, what we're trying to describe to you between myself, Rudy, Rod, Mark, Simon, is how we're going to make that difference in the front end, in the consumer's mind, through very nuanced ways, we believe, to own a category of motorcycling, and which is different, which has not been done before. And so that's the overview of what I'm trying to accomplish with you all today. And of course, I might miss out quite a few things. We have a question and answer later. But as Lalit said, one of the ideas, there's quite a few new people here as well. One of the ideas is to go back a little bit in history. I'm going to do it with the perspective of, I won't repeat the same stories. I know some of you who've heard it many times will get a bit bored. So what I'm going to do is say it in the perspective of what lessons we've learned, let's say, from things that we've done in the past. As you know, for me personally, and I think for the new evolution of Royal Enfield, the year 2000 was a very important time. It was also when I joined the company as the CEO, but the more important point was that we were at the brink of collapse. And the one takeout we had, and we still hold that very strongly in our understanding and learning and culture, is that at that time we invested in capacity well before we had a view on demand, or well before we truly understood the demand situation. And It's happened a couple of times before in the history of Royal Enfield as well. In the 80s that happened as well, with big plants in Rani Pit and various other places in the south. So that is one part of history, and when we're talking about the capacities, and a lot of you ask us about, our 600 plus thousand which we're planning next year, or 900,000 in a few years from now. Capacities we can always make. I think that's, of course, with a bit of time lag and phase lag, so, Govind. But capacity today is an understood phenomena. There's lots to be done to do it well, to do it in quality, to do it efficiently, to do it at cost, and to get the right cost structures out of it. But one mistake we don't want to make in the future is to have a huge supply surplus situation. There will always be some differences in demand and supply, but we don't want to be in a position of weakness because of oversupply. And you can say a lot of automobile companies in the world today are in that position where the capacities are so huge, they get into a negative spiral because they have to sell more to cover their capacities. They do all sorts of wrong things, in my opinion, for the brand to make that happen. And wrong things means discounts, means pushing rather than creating demand, and getting into a negative spiral. So while we are creating capacities, the other point to note is that our operating model and our business model also accounts for that. So if at any time in the long term, in the future, we land at a place where the demand is lower than supply, and it can happen for Royal Enfield. We're not invincible. Even at that point, we've done all the scenario planning and other things. We still hold our heads way above water. We still make pots of money. Our margins really don't get affected too much. And that's how we're constructing this company and this business model, so that we don't get into positions like we did in the past. Nothing is guaranteed in life, nothing is guaranteed in business, but that's the kind of thinking process we have to get ourselves in the right place. And we've been doing that in India, which is to build capacity, or let's say in line with the demand position. But from a historical perspective, that's also one of the reasons we've, in the recent times with Rudy and Rod and others, for example, leading the thought process, we've pivoted our thinking process in international markets from going after countries to cities. And Rudy is going to talk about that later, but I'm just telling you the historical context and the point there, which is that we want to create demand in a country where Royal Enfield is relatively unknown. So I'm, for a second, leaving out USA, Europe, where our brand is still known a little bit. But I'm going into absolutely new markets like in Latin America, where we're relatively unknown or entirely unknown. There, what we don't want to do, I want to paint a scenario which we don't want to do. We don't want to go in, build a big plant like some of our compatriots do, put in tons of cash, build a big plant, figure out distribution, put in the products, and then suffer. Suffer because no one's going to buy the product, right? You have to, people don't automatically purchase. And if people are not purchasing, you get into a negative spiral of discounting and pushing and dealer push and inventory pile-ups and all of that. We do not want to be in that position. So what we're doing instead, and the type of thing we're doing, this is only an idea of what types of things we're doing, because we will also keep finding a path which might be slightly different from what I'm describing. But what we're trying to do is to build demand in countries and cities where we're relatively unknown. So one of the ideas, and it's I can only describe it to you in not too much depth, but is that in the nicest part of the most influential city, in a new geography that we're going to, we want to build a very strong retail presence, a very good store, single store, for example, and spend a year or 2 or 3, if required, to develop that store, to develop the culture of Royal Enfield and motorcycling, to have the right people coming in, to have to sell the product properly as it is supposed to be sold, and therefore to build a following for our motorcycles in that place. It's not exactly, but similar to the strategy followed maybe 15 years ago in India, where we put all our focus on big cities, knowing that eventually the smaller cities will, if the big cities do well, the smaller cities will follow. But it's not the other way around. So that's an idea of the type of thing that we're planning even in international markets, and that's come from our position of creating demand, which is much more important than creating supply first. Our historical context of 2000 also taught us another very important thing, which is that building a full new supply chain, as we attempted to do in Jaipur, and building a full new team and culture when we set up our first motorcycle plant, our new motorcycle plant there, it's much tougher than extending the same one. So as a result, after in Chennai, from Tiruvuttur plant, which you didn't see today, that's our old plant, you saw Oragadam plant. Now, to build Oragadam plant, all of our engineers, our supply base, our capability set, our managers, they're all sitting right here. So for us to be able to manage that and to build a culture of a team and organization was, I believe, much better, much simpler, and certainly the supply chain side of it, our sourcing, our suppliers, all in one place, rather than going to a totally new place and trying to set up something totally new there. So these are some of the things that we've learned over time. Another thing we learned also from our near demise, 15 years ago or even before that, was that we cannot fight our extremely strong competition, our Japanese and now Indo-Japanese, you can call it competition, by trying to emulate them. There were ideas, as you may imagine, 15 years ago, that the market is all in commuter segments, so let's make a good commuter motorcycle. But we were very, very clear that by emulating them or by copying them, we're never going to succeed. So the only way to succeed, the only possible way to succeed, is to do something extremely different and try and move the market there. And so that was actually first for survival and then for success. And fortunately for us, we were able to hang in there and do what we did and move the market. But I'm very certain, had we followed a path of trying to copy what the Japanese did, we would never have gotten there. We would never have gotten anywhere. It might have seemed the safer option at the time, but I think all of us can agree that it would not have brought us anywhere close to where we are right now. These type of things also now we're thinking about our next wave of growth and putting these ideas in. I mean, to copy the Europeans or the Americans or the Japanese for that matter to try and become a big world player, that's not going to work for us either. So we will describe to you over time what our idea of becoming a global player is and how we plan to do that. Could I have some water, please? Thank you. And another learning and example that we had was, thank you, when we weren't able to sell, when we were struggling to sell motorcycles and when we had problems in dealerships, we learned the power of experimentation really for us, which was, we tried 15 different things I remember in the year 2001, 2002 on retail side to try and see what works. And for some reason what worked was building our own stores, and that's not a blueprint for the future necessarily, but that's what helped us at that time. But what it did was, it wasn't about the new stores as much as about learning through placing a lot of small bets in different places, seeing the reaction of those, improving them, and then taking them further. And that's how we've been operating on many different areas. On some areas, you can't do that. So in some areas, like building a new plant where it's a step function, it's slightly different. But in other areas where you can go incremental step by incremental step, that's something that as an organization we've learned very well how to do. And it also helped us in this example of setting up our own stores. Today you can say 10% of our sales in India comes from Royal Enfield owned stores. But that's not the real story. The story is that every city that we set up our own store in catalyzed that city. Even the existing dealers grew multifold in those cities. It's not all as a result of our own stores, but it's the catalyzing effect of something like that which helped in showing, let's say, dealers a new way of selling, etc. So we're all about catalyzing growth as opposed to forcing it, or as opposed to being pushy about it. And similarly, by conducting small rides and events, which we used to do all the time, and the type of response we got, and I'm talking about 10, 15 years ago, was phenomenal. I mean, the customers came back, they were like so excited about it, so in love with it, with the idea. We said, we're on to something here. There is something out here. And then we did multiple things with it. In some cases, we created marquee rides like the Himalayan Odyssey, like Ridermania, which just concluded in Goa, which became big properties on their own. But what we also did was, we understood the power of building our brand through individual experiences and through collective experiences of individuals, and we've rolled out the idea of local level rides and clubs which form on their own, but with a little nudge and support and help from us, to form an ecosystem of motorcycling in the country, which didn't exist, and we have not overtly, but maybe a little bit from support, or let's say from, in some ways we've helped it form. So that's by and large, some of the historical context. And to me, the headliner there is that what brought us to this entire party, which is, there are lots of lessons learned, but what's going to take us forward are not the things we did in the past, but of course we need to add new capabilities, new dimensions, and we're going to talk about those over the next few hours. But also the understanding of how to work the brand and the business model, that's what's important, and that's the big learning that we have. Moving on and looking at the future, what I can say is that we do have an extremely clear picture of and direction of our goals. We know what we want to accomplish. However, we don't have a predetermined path on how to get there. And I'll explain that part also, because we don't want to have an extremely predetermined path. Of course, we have a business plan, and we have initiatives and activities and all of that. But we've kept it open enough so that we can course correct, we can improve it over time. Our goals are, very simply at a very broad level, we want to be #1 in the world in middleweight motorcycles. I don't think we're very far from that, because the market is actually really small, but we don't really consider ourselves as #1 only because we're still largely an Indian player. So I can't credibly call ourselves a global player right now, because we're not really. And but But probably, as far as the market is concerned, it's probably just over 1 million units, and we're nearly half of that. So obviously, we're probably already number one, but that's not the point. The point is to actually be a big player in a lot of the important markets in the world, a relevant player, and to eventually to grow the size of the market. So we're not happy that the middleweight motorcycle market is only 1 million in 3 years' time or 5 years' time. It should be 10 times that number. And if we're a significant part of that much larger market, that is success for us. Within that, we have two, and there's a geographic and product split and all of that, but if you take it geographically, of course, the big one is India, and that's over 95% of our sales today. But even here, I mean, a lot of the questions from all of you and from a lot of people I get is that, where can you go in India? How much further can we go in India? And again, we don't like to put a ceiling on that number. We don't like to put a limit on that number because, if we had, we probably wouldn't have even reached this point right now because this was way beyond maybe what we had initially expected. The point is that, give or take, we're around 4% market share right now in the Indian motorcycle market. So it gives us a lot of room to grow. We are around, I'm just giving very loose numbers, we're probably around 8% revenue share in the Indian motorcycle industry and possibly around 15-16% of profit share, considering we're way ahead profitability-wise from all other players. But the good news is that after all of that, we're around only 2% of population share. So of the existing fleet of motorcycles in India, I imagine we aren't more than 2% of that. So it gives us a lot of headroom to grow. And we are a trading up brand. We're not a luxury brand. We're a brand which is a natural step up from existing motorcycles. And if you look at analogies in different industries, the potential for that, a step up brand is many X what we are right now. And the good thing is that I believe there's enough headroom to grow because we are still in a very positive part of the cycle where there is increasing visibility of Royal Enfields on the roads and audibility is even higher because you can hear a motorcycle, lots of motorcycles pass, but you always hear a Royal Enfield when it passes. So our visibility is growing, which encourages people, it gives people an idea that this is a successful product and we want it. And if you go down to smaller cities and smaller towns, where our visibility was even lower a few years ago, it's growing even there. So our visibility is growing, our desirability is therefore growing, our residual value is off the charts. It's for an automotive product, it's really, really good compared to any other automotive product, which encourages customers again to purchase a motorcycle because they know they can, if they want to trade it in a couple of years, they can at a reasonably good price. Our retailer viability, which is an extremely important parameter, is really good as well. So a lot of dealers for some car brands, for some motorcycle brands are really struggling to make ends meet. But a Royal Enfield dealer is doing, by and large, is doing really well. And that helps. When dealers are doing really well, every new town that we're going to add a dealer, we have scores of excellent applicants, some of them existing dealers of other brands, but even fresh ones. And that's very important for the franchise to grow. And of course, the access to the brand is also increasing because of retail, untapped area of financing, which we've not really done or supported our brand with that much. Over time, that can help us grow our brand. So there's a lot of things going on the Royal Enfield front. And of course, over time, some beautiful, awesome new products, which will also come and help us grow the India market. So that's all in the coming years. So with that backdrop of the India market, which we're working on, it's not something that is on autopilot at all. There's a ton of work going on to continue to keep that momentum up, which Rudy is going to tell you more about. We've now been working over the last few years on our international strategy, and there are two paths in international markets. One is developing markets, such as Southeast Asia, Latin America, and the other is let's say the richer countries like Europe, US, or heritage markets as we call them, Japan, Australia. And a lot of the developing markets where I've been personally spending time and trying to understand what the scene is there. If you look at it objectively, the mid-size motorcycle market in those countries should be much better developed than it is in India. There is a bigger motorcycling culture, let's say, in Latin America. The per capita incomes are much better. The road infrastructure, the motorcycling concepts, the sale of, let's say, high-end motorcycles, all of those as a proportion to total motorcycle sales are actually better in a lot of Latin American and Southeast Asian markets than they are in India. Yet in India, the middleweight motorcycle market has grown over the last few years, thanks to us. But that's not happened in a lot of other developing markets. And our opinion is that that's not happened because the right, not just product, the right offering is the right term, the right offering has not been placed in front of those consumers. There are products, but they're honestly not very nice. And they don't have much around them. It's just a product, a 400cc or 500cc, 600cc product. But consumers want more. They want something evocative. They want something which is fun. And not all consumers want that. So some consumers want very fast or very heavy or whatever. But a lot of consumers do want something with soul and personality and heritage and something that sort of gets them excited about motorcycling again, not just another motorcycle. And we believe that we can occupy that space. We believe we can grow that market in some of these countries. But we have to do it sensibly. We have to do it sensitively. We have to do it we don't have a copybook, so we don't do it in exactly the style that we did from India. But we do have an idea that we want to do it brand-led. We want to do it as a pull strategy, so consumers want us. It's not a push strategy. And how do we create conditions in a new market, in, let's say, Latin America or Southeast Asia, for that to happen, where it's a brand-led pull, which customers demand more motorcycles, and that's the kind of environment that we're trying to create. But we see that opportunity absolutely loud and clear in front of us. And in heritage or mature markets, where motorcycles have already gone extreme, they've already gone to a level where they're big and heavy and expensive and fast, and there we see a bit of a pullback. We see the urban audiences, we see youngsters who, by and large, going to use the motorcycle in cities. They want, again, something fun, exciting, non-intimidating, and it's more post-performance. So they're not looking at performance specifications anymore. They're looking at the overall mix and the product. So something with character. That's the market that we're going for. And again, to the point from our history, if we were to map the market today for a historic-led, brand-led, or let's say classic, to put it simply, motorcycle middleweight market in developing markets or developed markets. It's tiny. It doesn't exist. So from that perspective, it doesn't make sense to enter a market which doesn't exist. But we believe that we can create that. And creation does take time. So it's not something which is going to happen tomorrow. We can't force the issue either. We have to seed the idea, and we have to get people to desire it. It's not going to be a passive strategy, but it's not going to be a push strategy either. But this time round, we have a lot of strengths. We have a balance sheet which is really strong. We have a business model that's really, really kicking in, and it's doing exceptionally well. So we have leverage, we have capability. We've been building our team over the last few years, and that's probably one of the most important things we've done, but we'll get to that. And that's really, with the foundation that we have of a company that's strong, with strong finances, with the plant you saw, which is really kicking in. You're going to hear about the new products that are coming out. So with all of that, I believe, we would, in the next few years, we should be able to start making the right inroads into international markets in a manner which is very different and in a manner which only we can do. And that's important. And like I said, with the goal we have about mid-size motorcycling, and with the idea of what we're going to do in India, in developing markets, in developed markets, that's where we're heading towards. But to get to that, we will, you might see us doing one thing and retreating, or hopefully succeeding in some areas and then expanding on those. We have ideas of how we want to do it, but there's no exact predetermined path for the next 5 years. Chop, 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 this is how we're going to do it, because it's a market creation activity. It's not just a copy and paste activity. And in order to do that, like I said, we plan to do a lot of experiments. We plan to do things very differently. But most importantly, like I said, we've built a very strong team in Royal Enfield over the last couple of years, from industries well beyond automotive and motorcycling, and we're building, and I believe we have an organization culture which is tight, which is fun, where, and with the type of capabilities we have, with the type of people, with the type of organization culture, that's what's going to be the catalyst in taking the right decisions. We're going to take tens of thousands of decisions over the next few years, big decisions medium big decisions, in order to get us to where we want to. And it's a quality of our direction, of our goals, and of our team, which will help us in making most of those good decisions right and in the right direction. And it's the values and operating principles that we have which will nudge us in the right direction and form boundaries so that we don't waste our time, right? I think that's one of the things that I believe we do really well in Royal Enfield, is that we really don't waste our time. We don't go after ideas or markets or stuff which doesn't fit into our picture. We know what we want in the future, and we know what will, and the filter then therefore becomes very easy, that this won't help us in this path, so we won't pursue either this path or, so the filters are very strong, and we have these operating principles. One is less is more. So one of the things we keep talking about and we keep using, not just talking about, in our decision-making process is that when we're faced with multiple choices, we try and always narrow down to less is more. So we don't want to do too much. We want to do a few things. We want to do them exceptionally well. So as an idea on motorcycle models, Mark will maybe tell you, I don't know if he's in his presentation, but when we have these huge dialogues and differences in the organization, and we say we have too many things coming up. We push very hard to converge. Will this new product really add to our, to our portfolio in a manner which is very meaningful? If not, let's kill it. Let's not have it. Let's put our energy behind what we've already decided and put more effort, put more detail, put more validation, put everything else we've got behind less. So we do a few things and do them really well. In any case, we're never going to be everything for everybody. That's not Royal Enfield. We want to be the first choice for a few people. And with that idea of being the first choice for a few people, with that kernel we will expand rather than trying to have a portfolio which is, for example, everything for everybody, and as a result ending up not being relevant perhaps for many people. So at the end, what we are doing is we are playing to disrupt the motorcycle industry by creating a new category globally. That is what we're actually after. We believe that the motorcycle industry is really stayed. We believe that, everything people are doing is just incremental. The new models are incremental, the new ideas are incremental. But truly we believe that motorcycle companies largely come from a technology and manufacturing background, because that was the key essence when they were formed, let's say. So when Japanese motorcycle companies came into existence, it's because of either technology or manufacturing excellence that brought them to the table, right? That made them what they are. And that's still very much in their DNA. But our belief is that moving forward in creating, let's say, moving forward from an environment where we want to change how motorcycles are viewed and used and sold, and is that there's a lot after the selling process. So once the motorcycle is sold, the in-use experience, the ecosystem which we build around the customer and the experiences that he gets, that's where the trick will be. And to make it in a manner which resonates with the young consumer of today, not of the type which did 30 years ago. An example which Rod and I were discussing over a call the other day was how Harley Davidson, for example, did phenomenally well maybe 3-4 decades ago with their clubs and riding. And that was post-purchase, right? After people purchased the motorcycles, they got into all these clubs and did all these things and all. But honestly, that doesn't work anymore. That's not the vibe today. Youngster today doesn't want to sort of, in that context, I believe, have tattoos and wear that big leather and go out. That's your grandfather, man. That's not you right now. So the idea of today is very different. It's more, it's the cultural side of it is very different. And to get the nuances right, that's the space that we're going after. And I know that leaves all this discussion with a bit of ambiguity, but we know what we're doing and we know how to construct that. And that's the essence of what we're trying to build as a global brand in Royal Enfield. And that's what we want to do over the next 10-15 years, is to build in, I may use the wrong words and I'll get, lopped by my guys here a bit, but it's nearly a new age brand, but it's not new age in that way. A global motorcycling brand, but which is rooted in tradition and history, but which is relevant for the consumer today, right? So And that's really what we're after. Our entire job is to do that, to build a brand which resonates in a totally different way with the consumers globally. And if we can accomplish that over the next 10 odd years, I think we've done a good job. And that's by and large it for me. So just to end my part of this is to tell you what to expect from us and not to expect from us in the coming time. What you can expect from us is extreme focus. We're not going to get into different, totally unrelated areas. So all of that. We're going to stay very focused, mid-size motorcycles, that's what we're after. We're going to crack away at it. Our path might meander a little bit in order to reach our goal, but we're focused. We're going to persevere. We're not giving this up. We're not, halfway through, we're not going to say, well, it's a good thought. No, we're going to keep falling down. We're going to keep picking ourselves up. We're going to persevere like crazy because we know what the goal is at the end, and we know that how interesting it is. You can expect continued innovation and on our business model and improvement and enriching and fortifying our business model, which is extremely dear to us. That's something we work with very closely. You can expect brand-led growth. This is a brand that we're growing. The primary idea is the brand, and everything else is secondary to it. So if the last filter, well, maybe is the business model and all, but it's the brand really. And if it works for the brand, it works for the company. And if it doesn't work for the brand, if it's going to somehow pull the brand down or put the brand off a little bit, we're not going to do that, even if it could mean a buck for us today. What you shouldn't expect from us is linear outcomes, that we put in effort into one area and we get outcome immediately or we get outcome as planned, especially not in our new areas. A lot of it is experimental. We will put in a lot more resource before we get outcomes in international markets, in newer products. It's going to be like that. So that's how we look at it, that what you will expect is that if it's not working, we'll change course or we'll do something different. And don't expect a copy and paste approach. We're not copying anybody, and that is sometimes the easier path, but and in some ways we will. So in our in some areas, like for example, when we are studying aftermarket, we want to copy the best in class, right, in some aspects. Or when we're doing manufacturing, we want to see what the best in class is doing and we want to catch up there. But in a lot of our consumer-facing areas, don't expect us to do a copy and paste. We want to find our path and the path which is right for us. And eventually, we want to, every country that we enter in every geography, it's not country now, every city we enter, we just don't want to enter the city. We want to be a part of the cultural fabric of that location. And that to me is the ultimate test. If we are able to accomplish that and be a part of the cultural fabric of the place that we go to, be a part of the local dialogue and part of their lives, like we are in India, we're embedded in India. We want to be embedded in other countries. And once we're there, we're going to become a global brand. So that's all from me now, and over to Rudy. And just once again, I think Lalit did introduce Rudy, but I just want to point out that Rudy's at the perfect spot now, and you'll hear from him. He's long enough to know about Royal Enfield, but still an outside-in approach. And I think the important thing when Rudy came on board, he came on board incidentally because he wanted a quick delivery on a motorcycle. And so I knew he was the right guy. But we actually dialogued for a year. The whole of 2014 we dialogued before Rudy came on in 2015. And just to make sure that we were aligned in what we want to accomplish and how we want to accomplish it. So in a sense, he's been here nearly 2 years. So welcome, Rudy, and over to you now.
Thank you, Sid.